Recovery podcast is real life stories from everyday people in recovery. From mental health issues, trauma, substance misuse, and behavioural addictions. Please visit the website www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk for links to social media and a range of books written by your podcast host, Bren Coy.
Hi everybody, I am Bizzy. My name is Elizabeth Chance and my nickname is Bizzy. And I actually was born in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I was raised in St. Louis, Missouri, home of Anheuser-Busch and the famous Cardinals, the baseball team, the Cardinals, if you know that. I'm from the Midwest, so I'm apple pie in baseball. And I always mention Anheuser-Busch because they own Budweiser, all those different Busch, all those kinds of beers. So Amstel Light, all these kind of American beers, the owner of all of those was right in my backyard. Not that that's an excuse, but it was just made things easier. So
Is that why you're an alcoholic?
Yeah, I wish it was that easy. I don't think that's it. I'm sorry. I know it's not. So both of my grandmothers were alcoholics. And my mother is Irish Catholic and my father is Jewish. Not that that's an, nationality, but he was, but his mother was an alcoholic and died at 68. And my Irish Catholic grandmother actually passed away at 93. And they talked about alcoholism, my parents, in a way that was like, oh my gosh, like you don't want to get, like it was like, oh my gosh, they're alcoholics. So I had known being an alcoholic was a really negative thing in my house. It was like the last thing you want to do is have these things that these grandmothers of yours have. And, but at 13, I started drinking. And growing up in St. Louis and the crowd I hung out with, we all kind of, I don't know if all of our parents were just all at the same cocktail parties or what it was, but we were all seemed to be free and drinking at a very young age. And we'd go to each other's houses and we'd ride bikes to each other's houses and we would be drinking. And I didn't think that there was anything wrong with that. And from the minute I started drinking, I blacked out. I blacked out from the very beginning. I was a blackout drinker from day one. I loved it. I loved it. It was like the best love affair I ever had because once my parents had a very tumultuous divorce and it was really, to think about it now, it's kind of like somebody would probably say it's PTSD because it was very dramatic and very traumatic. And so when I picked up that beer or whatever it was that I'm not one of those people that remembers that exact first drink. I can't tell you where I was, what it looked like, what it smelled like. All I know is I drank it and I was like, this is Mecca. Hello, I love it. And it made all the feelings go away. It was perfect because I didn't have to feel. Feelings were, and we'll get into this later on, but feelings were something that we didn't really have in our family. You didn't grow up with feelings. It's like, get moving, keep walking. No need to cry in your soup. You've got lemons, make lemonade. So I drank and crazy things happened in my life. And I feel like most alcoholics, if you're listening to this, you probably have these war stories, but I've had all the war stories, crashed cars. I got a DUI at 18 for the first time. And my father picked me up from jail and I had one high heel on and one high heel off. And I'm like, don't you know who I am? And the police were like, no, we don't really care. Just shut up and get in the car. And my dad comes to pick me up and he's like, oh my God, I can't believe you did this. And the next morning he said, I'm taking you to breakfast. And I said, okay, great. Well, we get in the car to go to breakfast and he gets on the highway, like the freeway. And I was like, why are we getting on the highway? And he said, well, I'm actually taking you to rehab. I tried to jump out of the car while it was still moving. And that didn't happen. I ended up getting there and I called my mother because as I mentioned, my parents had this horrible divorce and I'm a master manipulator like most alcoholics. So I called my mom and I said, Dad has me in this rehab. You have to come get me. She's like, okay, this is what you're going to do. Go to the bathroom and climb out the window. So I did that. I went into the bathroom. I said, I have to go to the bathroom. And I go and I climb through the window and jump out. And I'm like, oh okay, that was it. And there was never ever really talk of it again. It was like, well, that's just, it's like going to the mall. Who cares? We just went to rehab. It's not a big deal. So I continued drinking. I mean, I just continued drinking and I continued drinking. And I ended up getting, I graduated from high school by the skin of my teeth. I got to go to a college that took girls. It was a girls' school, and pretty much, I think if your parents could pay for it, you could go. And I went there, and it was perfect because it was all girls, and I was in Washington, D.C. going to college, and and I just drank all the time. I mean, it was funny. A dear friend of mine who actually passed away, we went back to school many years later, and these students that are there now were like, did you guys ever get a chance to like go into Georgetown in downtown Washington? And we're like, when were we ever in school? Like, I never did, I just did what I was supposed to. Like, I showed up, hungover as whatever could be, and just got through it. I was just like, I feel like I was literally just walking around as a shell of a human. I didn't really have anything. I was just doing what I was supposed to do. All right, I checked that box. Check that box. So I graduate, and I met my ex-husband, and he drank the same way I did. So when you meet somebody who drinks the same way you do, well, why don't you play house? So you get married and you have 3 kids. And so I have 3 kids really quickly. And when I got pregnant, I wouldn't drink when I got pregnant because it was the weirdest. I felt like this, like for some reason, it was like, I have to take care of this thing that's inside of me. I can't, this is a baby, and anything I ingest or do, if I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I just didn't do it. I was like, I'm pregnant, I can't do that. I will not do, but the minute I gave birth, I was like, get me a bottle of champagne and get me a pack of cigarettes. So the minute I was done, like carrying the baby, I'd be like, all right, it's time to be off to the races. And
why do you think that was? I mean, obviously it's like the obvious answer is like a sense of responsibility, but what do you think was driving that?
I think that because what they said, what you heard, I mean, what you would read about, and like, you shouldn't drink, and you definitely shouldn't smoke, and the baby can get, I mean, and this is, I mean, nursing was kind of a big deal, but not that big of a deal. And, but it was literally the media and the doctors were like, well, you really shouldn't drink. And I was like, well, you know what? And the reality was, I never really drank one drink. So if the doctor had said, well, you could have 1 glass, I can't even imagine probably trying to do that, right? That wouldn't have worked.
There's no point.
I'm like, what the hell? 1 for what? No, thank you.
Yeah.
And I mean, I used to say, I have a wooden leg. I can drink with the guys. I can go, I went, the way I drank is that I would drink, I'd swear I was only going to have 1. I remember walking into the bar going, I swear I'm only going to have 1. I'm going to have 1 dirty martini. Who the hell's ever had 1 dirty martini? Not me. So I'd have 1 dirty martini, and then I'd have a bottle of wine, and then I'd have another bottle of wine, and then I might have a shot of whiskey. Maybe I'll have a Sex on the Beach shot. Maybe I'll have, I drank until it was last call, and then I'd go home and drink some more. When I got pregnant, it was like, all right, there's no way I'll just take care of this baby. And I did it 3 times. And the 3rd time I got pregnant, which is crazy. I was like, oh my God, I have to do this again. I have to stop drinking again. Oh my God. It was crazy. I was not that excited because I was like, oh my gosh, I have to start over. I have to do this again. So, my 3rd child's born, and I've got 3 little kids, and I've got a husband, and he's still drinking, but he's hiding he's putting it underneath the lip of the couch and everything. And I'm like, what, why aren't you showing me what you're drinking? Why are you hiding that? And I'd buy a bottle of whatever, and it'd be gone in a night. And I'm like, what the hell's wrong with you? At least stand up for yourself. And I'm not going to use the words that I used to him because they aren't appropriate. But I was pretty much like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you hiding? You're like, show me your shit, whatever. And he couldn't. So I was at a dead end, and I'm like, I have 3 kids, a drunk husband. I can't do this anymore. And so I divorced him. And divorcing him literally felt like I threw a grenade in the living room and shrapnel hit everyone. So everybody was sad. And it was because of me. And my drinking, which at that point was, I was drinking still. Every time I drank, I got drunk, but I wasn't drinking that often. But the minute that happened, I was like off to the races. And I I had rented a house and I said to the landlord, here's some money. Don't talk to me about money. And I drank and drank and drank and drank. I mean, I drank all the time. I drank as much and as often as I can. I've been to the hospital for a hangover, and it was the saddest and loneliest existence I could ever imagine that I remember in my whole entire life. And it was funny because people would see me out in public because I drank out in public. I was not a person who drank at home. I was at every social function. I was at big balls. I was at big cocktail parties with the creme de la creme. And I'm sitting there and I remember this girl looking at me one night, and I went up to the bar and I was ordering a dirty martini, and she goes, God, you look so great. You're handling this divorce so well. And I was like, oh my, just keep them coming. Just keep them coming. Because I don't know how to have a feeling, right? At this point, I have no idea what a feeling is. And any feeling that, like any trickle of like a feeling coming in, I just want to break into. I'm so fearful that I'm going to break into a million pieces like Humpty Dumpty, and you'll never be able to put me back together again. Because I was that broken and that screwed up. I had no idea. So the end of the story is not that exciting. There was no sirens following me. There was no metal around my wrists. My sister actually married a guy. She married this guy. Now they're divorced, but she married a gentleman who was sober. And he had been sober for a couple of decades when my sister married him. And I went to the wedding. And this is after my grandmother has passed. My 93-year-old grandmother had passed. And out of 13 grandchildren, I was asked to give the eulogy. And I had gotten so drunk the night before, like I fell in my kitchen. I sprained my ankle. I mean, I was a total shit show. And I show up at the church. And if you had brought a match to my face, I would have blown up because I would just reeked. I mean, even though I might have bathed in Chanel, I was like still like just reeked of booze. It was coming out of every pore. And, so it was just at the end of my drinking, I was drinking, I was adding it to, like, I looked at it, I kept my booze above my refrigerator and, that cabinet, and I'd go there and I'd be like, I'm just like, I'm shaking, you'd get those little tremors, and I'm like, I got to mix something with this. I'm shaking too much. And, so at the end, my sister marries this guy. I go to the wedding, and I didn't think I was that bad because I remembered a couple things. Not many, but I did remember. I remember I got on stage with the band, and I can't sing, as you can hear from my voice, but I did. I got up on the stage, and the next day, my mother had a brunch for all the guests that were from out of town, and my brother-in-law had a friend who had been sober for a really long time, and this guy was really attractive, and he came up to me, and he said, "Do you know that you have a drinking problem?" And I was like. Now, this is the first time like a stranger at something. Like I had lost friendships. Certain things had happened along the way, but nothing like from a stranger that really point blank. I had said something to me, and I had known, as I told you, like, because now I'm adding it to my drinks. I've got these 3 little babies. Everybody's running around, and I'm sitting here hungover. I'd be like, go play in traffic. And I literally meant go play in traffic. Like I had the worst hangovers. And when he said this to me, I was in shock, and I don't know why I didn't say anything like, fuck you, who are you to tell me that? But I didn't, and I listened to him, and that evening I got into my car for a 2-hour drive to the beach, and I was in the car by myself. And the entire time I was in the car, I was like sitting here, and I was like, your head goes, am I an alcoholic? Am I not an alcoholic? Am I an alcoholic? Am I not an alcoholic? Like the entire time, I'm like sitting here doing this thing in my head. So I get to the beach, and somebody says, do you want a drink? And I said, no, I'm not going to have a drink. I'm not going to have a drink. So I woke up the next day, meaning, guess what? I'm not an alcoholic. See, I didn't have to drink last night. See, I'm not like one of those people because, stereotypically the alcoholic lives under the freeway. They don't have a car in their driveway. They have nothing. They've hit Skid Row. You can't be somebody that's like me that actually still has these things but is dead inside, right? That was my thing. But the material stuff was there, but me inside of Elizabeth was I was dead. So the next day I drink, and I'm literally at 3:00 in the morning, I'm sitting at the end of the dock of the bay, like literally sitting with my feet dangling over the water. And I have a pack of smokes, a cell phone, and a bottle of wine. And I woke up the next day, and I went for a run. And those who know me know I do not run unless there's police chasing me. And I went for a run, and I fell to my knees, and I said, God, please help me. I can't do this again. Please, please, please help me. I cannot do this anymore. Please help me. And that's the last time I've had a drink.
Do you know what's really weird? I mean, not only have I heard hundreds and hundreds of people say those exact words at the end, but that was the exact words I used as well. I got down on my knees and I said exactly the same thing that you said, and I've never had a drink since. It's just crazy, isn't it? It's like that surrender is, it's just, it's a miracle. It's definitely a miracle. I mean, how can it be that you're addicted to alcohol one day and then you surrender like that, and then the next day you don't take a drink and you haven't taken a drink since?
I truly believe it's a spirit. I feel like it's divine intervention. I think that you're ready to surrender. It's such a spiritual thing.
Yeah.
I was never enough, right? I was never enough. I might have looked okay on the the package on the outside, like I'm attractive, I have the right outfit, the right shoes, the right handbag, the right car, the right house, but I was so alone and so scared, and I was that little girl that had started drinking at 13, but now and I was in a 37-year-old body at that point, and I have 3 kids, and it was scary, like deciding to do this. And I used the 12 steps, and it was because my brother-in-law said to me, well, if you want to do this, you're going to call this lady. And I was like, all right, I'll call this lady. And I called this lady, and she had gone to the University of Pennsylvania, which is a very brilliant school. And her drug of choice was heroin. Mine was alcohol. But she had what I wanted, which was this peace and this serenity. And she was a mom, and she had 3 kids, and her life wasn't like dramatic and crazy like mine. And I met with her, and she was like, well, if you're going to do if you want what I have, you're going to do what I say. And I'm like, okay, well, what is that? And she's like, well, you're going to go to a meeting every day, and you're going to call me every day. And I was like, what? I'm busy. Didn't you get my nickname's Busy? I can't do that. That seems, well, if you want what I have, you're going to do what I ask. And for the first time in my life, I listened to somebody. I don't know why. Like, I never listened to like a priest, my parents, a grandparent, no one. If anybody had said something to me, I would never listen to it. But this woman, I was like, okay. Like, I wanted to be sober more than I wanted to be drunk. And I feel that still here, 14 years plus, whatever, I just have today. I still want it today more than anything in the entire world. And it has been, I ended up that my ex-husband did not get, he got sober 7 years ago. And so I was raising kids with a dad that was inebriated most of the time. And that was really hard. And, but the prayer thing worked. Like, my sponsor, I'd call her and I'd be like, or my spiritual advisor, whatever you want to call her, I'd call her and I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe he's doing this again. And I'd go into this huge dramatic story, and she'd be like, all right, well, now you have to go pray for him. And I'd be like, oh my God, no, I want a Ouija doll that I could put pins in. I don't want to pray for him. And, 7 years later, he almost got a DUI, going to pay a parking ticket at the police station. And he called me. And he said, and he calls me, he's the only person who calls me Liz. And he's like, Liz, you've got to come get me. And I said, what do you mean? And he's like, I'm at the police station. And if I get back in my car, they're going to arrest me. And I picked him up, and I took him to treatment, and I took my kids to visit him every weekend that they had family time. And he's doing much better. And now he's still sober. So that's amazing.
That's amazing, yeah.
It's crazy. And I have been rich and I've been poor during my sobriety. I've lost 3 of my closest friends in sobriety.
Through drinking or different things?
One flipped his car. He had been drunk from the night, had been drinking, and yeah. He decapitated himself driving home one night. Yeah. Totally wasted. Another friend ended up he was sober. He didn't die from alcoholism, but he had been sober, and he at 41 died of cancer. And the third one, somebody that was murdered one of my closest friends. So, but getting those phone calls and getting these feelings, and back to the feelings, I remember going in to see a therapist when I was first sober, and she was like, how do you feel? And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, am I cold? Like, do you want me to turn the air conditioner, or do you want to turn the heat up? Like, what? She's like, no, what feelings are you feeling? And I'm like, I don't know what those, like. So today when kids and like my daughter sometimes says, Mom, I have anxiety. I'm like, I don't even know what that really is, because I wasn't allowed to feel those feelings. So the longer I've stayed sober, the more I'm being aware of what is, these buzzwords and what those feelings really mean to someone, right? And there is a lot of anxiety, especially now with COVID. I mean, it's crazy how many people out there are, for one, they're stuck in their homes with people and there's no way out. I just heard of a guy who had 30 years of sobriety and picked up.
Really?
30 years of sobriety and picked up.
Oh God. Yeah, like a lot of people are struggling, aren't they? A lot of people. But I mean, like I've spoken about this quite a bit, not only on the podcast but just generally with people, and I've said like it shows the importance of having a program, because if you're just relying on the meetings and then the meetings are taken away from you, then you're going to struggle, and it's not about go to meetings obviously, like, and that's where we help the newcomer. But for those people that just rely on going to 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings a week, it must have been a massive wake-up call for those people. I mean, the program itself, I'd like to ask you about what your program is as well, because like I got into recovery 10 years ago, worked the steps. I've always had a sponsor. I've always done service. I've always followed the suggestions. I pray, I meditate, I take inventory, I help others. I do everything, because all the times that I've taken my foot off the gas and not done meditation or not done prayer, or I've decided not to take inventory for a while, I feel shit, So I have to do everything, and as a result of doing everything, I have peace of mind, like I actually have a peaceful head the majority of the time. And if I've not got a peaceful mind, then I know something's wrong and I know I need to look at something, I'm probably being selfish or I'm being dishonest or whatever the case may be. So it's just hugely, hugely important that, that you don't just work the steps once and then that's it, like you have a daily program for living, that's my take. Is that the same for yourself?
I'll tell you this. So there's a couple things. So with COVID, it's been very interesting. So I've always been a meeting maker. You just described it. I'm a meeting maker. I've been a meeting maker since day one. I started a meeting up in Wayne, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia. That's where I have another home up there. So I started a meeting there. When I got to Florida, I started a meeting on the beach. So for me, the minute my husband heard that my husband works he's on a computer all the time. So he saw all this stuff coming across Bloomberg, that something was coming, and he's like, we've got to be like, let's just hunker down. I want you to do start something else. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna start a Zoom meeting. So I started a Zoom meeting back in the very, very, very beginning. And it is something I do every day. So I host a meeting every morning on Zoom at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's been so interesting in so many ways, because there's so many people. I want to say half the people that come to this morning meeting have gotten sober in COVID. Now, then there's people with 3 decades, 4 decades that come to this meeting as well. But there's these people, the weird part about it, which is also cool, I think, because when I walked into my first meeting, into that church basement, and I've been to meetings in London. I've been to meetings all over the world, thank God. But I remember walking into that first meeting, and that was the scariest thing in my entire life. That was more scary to walk into that meeting than it was to have a baby, get married, do anything else, buy a car, buy a house, anything. Walking into that meeting and raising my hand and saying I'm an alcoholic was like the scariest thing I ever, ever, ever did. But it saved my ass. But people coming in today, yes, they have to introduce themselves, but they really don't. Like there's someone that comes to this morning meeting I host every day, and I have no idea who the person is. All it says is iPhone. And you're like, okay, they're a voyeur. But if that works for them and they're staying sober and they're too shy or whatever it is they're up in their head about, their ego's too big. That's always about our ego, right? It's always about our ego, which I love the acronym easing God out, because but I think it's helpful for some people, and maybe it's going to help people that maybe never would have had the courage to come into a room. Now they're starting here. They're getting comfortable in their own skin. they're sharing at a level that they're like, okay, I kind of like myself right now. And I just got 4 months of recovery, and you're like, wow, that's awesome. It's, I'm a firm believer in the steps. They work for me. As you mentioned, I believe 1, 2, and 3 is like the cha-cha. It's every day for me. I always have to wake up and be like, okay, yeah, I'm powerless over everything. There is a God, and it's not me. And I got to let go. And then you mentioned the 10th step is, really important to me as well. Just getting that, because it's a daily thing for me. My husband's been in long-term sobriety as well. He has 22 years, and it's not always perfect. And I'm not going to say, so I get jammed up. He gets jammed up. I might call him names, and then I feel like shit, like you were talking about. And I've got to write that down, because if I keep it in here, I was actually sharing about it this morning, and if I don't do that 10th step, it's like I have that thought, like it's a little baby thought, right? Like that person's an asshole, but then that person becomes an asshole, and then he becomes this, and he becomes that. Then I'm down the rabbit hole, and I'm leaving. It's over. I can't believe I even wasted 5 seconds with you.
The person is evil personified.
Exactly. And you're like, wait a minute, all I did was hand you the wrong milk for your coffee or whatever. But and then the prayer meditation you mentioned is it is a game changer. It's just getting quiet, and I do that every morning, and I just say, God, please. I say an abbreviated version of the 3rd step prayer, like, God, just have you be in charge of my thinking. I don't want to be in charge of my thinking today. Have me be the best me that I can be for you, God, as walking on the planet. And step 12, I sponsor a lot of women, and which is the best. It's amazing. It is, and they're all in different places. And I have people with longer sobriety than I do, and people with very little sobriety. And it has been just watching people grow. People come to these rooms you see somebody come in, and it's not like, it's not like you just won the lottery or you're like really high on life. You're like, no, I come into these meetings and I know I felt empty. It's like my soul, when you walk into an old church and you see the stained glass window in a really old church, right? Like, that window was really beautiful at one point, but there's all this soot on it, right? It's been sitting there. No one's dusted it. No one's cleaned it. And it's been sitting there. That's how I felt when I walked into the rooms. Like, my light was so out.
Yeah.
You see people get more and more sober, and that stained glass window all the dirt kind of goes away, and it's just the light.
And it happens after like a couple of weeks sometimes. Well, it does. I mean, there was a newcomer came into a meeting that I was at like 2 weeks ago, and she was shaking. She looked horrendous, like absolutely horrendous. And I saw her on Tuesday, and she looked completely normal. Like she looked like you wouldn't have even thought, like you'd have walked past her in the street and just thought she looks like a completely normal person. And I couldn't believe it, really. And I smiled to myself, and then I thought, but I've seen this over and over again. It just it shocks me every time, how quickly people get it back. But then there's that danger time, isn't there, of like, somebody who comes to the meetings and then they start to feel well, and then they don't get a sponsor and they don't work the steps, and that's when it all goes totally like terribly wrong.
And on my podcast recently, I've been doing the steps. My husband talks we just did step 5. We talked about step 5, and I'm just doing it how my experience was. I don't want to overstep anybody's sponsors, anything. And it's just my opinion. And I really believe it's so imperative to find a sponsor that you can be honest with. It is so important. And if the first person you get isn't the right person, like, you can find somebody else, right? And it's not, you're not firing. Whenever they say, are you going to fire that person? I'm like, yeah, the last I checked, they're not on my payroll. So I'm not firing them. It's another person. I just need another spiritual advice, somebody else that's going to help me that I feel like I can be honest with. And I think that's one of the biggest things is like, I luckily have had sponsors that I can dump on, right? I can call and throw up all that shit that I was talking about earlier that takes me down the rabbit hole and go, okay. And she can say, well, where's God in this? Or, the gratitude is just, I think gratitude still today is important. Like, when I get jammed up, I have to do gratitude in my life. And sometimes, I'm grateful for just the fact that I can breathe. I'm grateful that how many people didn't wake up today?
Yeah, I had my gratitude list onto my inventory every night, and I write a minimum of 5 things and a maximum of about 10 things, and it makes you appreciate the littlest things, like even just like the smile of my daughter, like spending quality time, that's something that goes on there every single night, or walking my dog, or like these things that you would normally take them for granted, and then the little things will start to get to you, and then they'll blow out of proportion. But if you keep reminding yourself of all the little things that make you happy and that you're grateful for, and actually, like I loved what you said right at the very beginning when you were talking about you had all the material things, like I was exactly the same. If from the outside looking in, you'd have thought I had it all made, I had a good job, I had a lovely wife, I had all the material, like money, nice clothes, nice car, nice place to live, living in London, like anybody would have thought this guy's got it made. And I was thoroughly, thoroughly miserable. And I wasn't grateful for anything, absolutely nothing. There was nothing in my life that I actually used to sit down and think, I'm really grateful that I've got that, And it's that psychic change, isn't it? It's a complete revolution in your thinking, like from being a materialistic, selfish bastard to being somebody that's just grateful for the little things. And I heard something in that meeting that I was talking about the other night, and so every morning this guy goes down and he says, I make a cup of tea for my partner and I make a cup of tea for me, and he said, I always go to put the milk in my tea first, and he said I have to stop myself and put the milk in her tea first just to remind myself she comes first. And I have a similar thing in the morning. I wake up in the morning and I always think to myself, right, okay, I hand it over and I think, right, what do I need to do for everybody else in the house first before I look after myself?
And the joy you get from that is just priceless. Like it's like it makes me tear up. Like when you were talking about your daughter's never going to have to see her dad drunk. Like how awesome is that? I mean, it's just like it's amazing. I mean, like for my kids, I got sober when my oldest was 10, and he says he remembers. I don't know if he really does, but it's like being there for them today and knowing I'm there for them no matter what. It doesn't matter what time of day they call, what they need, I will be there with bells on. Like it doesn't matter. Like I don't have to have judgment about it. I'm like, I'm just there, honey, whatever you need. And it's given me life that is just amazing. And I wanted to say one thing about the gratitude list. My husband was asked by a sponsor at one point. His sponsor said to him, I want you to be grateful for the things that you don't want in your life.
Wow. Be grateful for the lessons.
Exactly. Yeah. Grateful that, all right, I'm grateful I got a flat tire. Well, maybe God had me get the flat tire because I'm not on the road where there's an accident, right? Like I'm grateful for the fact that I missed whatever it is, but knowing that God, and I like to call my higher power God has a plan. If I turn over to that, it's so like right there, right now, I feel like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you listen? I don't know. Do you ever listen to the Joe Rogan podcast?
Oh my God, I love Joe Rogan.
Did you hear the Kanye West interview?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So, like when I loved the bit when he was talking about fear and faith. Yeah. Because, I mean, that's something that we hear in recovery all the time. And it's something that whenever I'm sharing, I always talk about it. And I always say, faith is the antidote to fear. And the way that he described it was perfect. It's like at the end of the day, it's like the only thing that I fear is God. And I mean, I don't, that's not my experience. Like, I don't fear God at all. But what I do fear, what I do have is I just have total faith in my higher power. And I call my higher power God. I call my higher power whatever, it doesn't really make any difference. I'm not religious. I'm just a spiritual person who has this belief in a power greater than myself. And I've written books about it, and I've, and I talk about it. But ultimately, the thing for me is it just takes that fear away. Like, I still experience every now and then I might have a little bit of anxiety around something, like the typical things, like if I have an interview or something like that. But the general fear of life, that kind of thing that stops you from doing things, is completely gone. I never ever wake up in the morning fearful, anxious, worried, stressed, depressed. Totally gone. And the reason for that is because I have faith in a higher power. And he couldn't have summed it up better. And it was interesting because when I was listening to him, I mean, he does sound crazy. Like, is the stream of consciousness that he's got going on
It gave me a headache in the beginning. I was like, I called my youngest son, Henry, and I'm like, Henry, have you listened to this? Have you watched this yet? Because I'm really lost. I'm like, and I felt kind of bad for Joe because you could see him and he was kind of like.
Yeah, I was feeling the same. I'm halfway through it and I'm just kind of getting into it now. And I'm like, okay. But what I liked about the way that Rogan dealt with it was like, he was just basically saying, look, you're tapping into something. You're like on this kind of wavelength that we're just not on. And actually, the way I interpret it is that he is kind of like, like when you look at alcoholics or addicts,
Yeah.
they're all on this spectrum, aren't they? And the majority of people that are in recovery, and I've watched a couple of your videos, and you're like this. You're like powerfully out there, passionate, energetic, and it's like there's people that have got that thing within them, and when they start taking drugs, like how he was describing that, they put him on these whatever it was, antidepressants or whatever, and it killed him. It like shut him down completely. That's what the drugs and the alcohol does to people. Whether it's pharmaceutical medications, alcohol, heroin, whatever it is, it just completely and utterly stunts that power. And
that soul. I was talking
soul,
about soul. Our soul. It's our connection. It's that soul that I described as the stained glass. Like, I believe that is the soot that goes on our soul. And at 13, for me, because I had it in my family, I have it in my tree, I could say, oh my gosh, that's where I got it, my grandmother's. That at least gave me a peace of mind, right? Like, I'm not just crazy. I am crazy, but you know what I mean? But to identify in the end, like my soul, like I have a soul sickness. I am never enough. And if I have 100 people around me and 99 people tell me that I'm great, and one person says you're a piece of shit, I'm gonna focus on that one person who says I'm a piece of shit, not the 99 others. And that's my disease. And the disease of like just the thoughts and everything else. That's why I need this spiritual higher power that we talk about, and that's why I need the steps, and that's why I need to work with other people. I was just telling my sponsor earlier, I was like, I feel great today. And she's like, well, why? And I said, well, I worked step 2 with 2 sponsees in the past 2 days. So like I am on, like, I feel amazing because I was reminded. I'm a born forgetter, right? Like I might not have had a drink in whatever many years I haven't had a drink, but I got to remember that I have to live in this 24 hours, in this moment.
Yeah, we forget very easily, don't we?
Yeah.
We forget and that's why I love going to meetings, whether it's Zoom meetings or whether it's the real thing, because I go there and I hear the same thing I've been hearing for 10 years, and then I think, oh shit, I forgot that. Or I haven't heard that for ages. I'm glad that I've been reminded of it, and the feeling that you get when you leave a meeting, it's just such a massive relief, to know. I mean, it's like this conversation, isn't it? Like, I'll get up from this conversation feeling really good. And before I sat down, I was a bit like, ugh, I can't really be bothered. I'll put a smile on. I always feel like that about everything that I do. I always think it's not going to be as good as I think it's going to be. And then I do it. And especially when it's related to recovery, I do it and I really enjoy it. And then I'll go downstairs and my partner will be like, how was it? I'll be like, it was brilliant. I had a really good conversation. But it's funny, when you're talking about the parent thing as well. My dad is in recovery, and I think he's like 30 odd years sober now. And yeah, and it's funny because him and my mum are now looking after my daughter 3 days a week. And you should see him with her. It's amazing. Like it just, it really touches me, like seeing them both, but especially my dad, because, I think he's kind of getting a second chance, because he said to me when they'd been looking after her for like a few weeks, he was sat next to me in the lounge, and he said it's really hard work, isn't it? And I was like, yeah, it's really hard work. And he was like, God, he said I'm glad I wasn't really around for your childhood. And I was like, cheers, Dad. That's why I messed up. But it was, it's cool because I think he's like really appreciating like how much love and attention and affection a child needs, and especially a girl. Like you've for some reason, like you give them even more, don't you? Like it's just beautiful. So we're all reaping the rewards of recovery, basically. And as you said, like all being well, my child will never see me drink. So hopefully she won't go through all that stuff, because even though I do agree that there's a genetic component to recovery, but I think that the environment pulls the trigger. I think that the environment is the bit that creates the trauma, the suffering. And, you know, if you're genetically predisposed to alcohol, like the way I'd say it is, my partner is genetically predisposed to alcoholism, i.e., if she drinks too much, she gets really, really drunk, and she can change, like a personality can change like mine did when I drank, but she hasn't got that early childhood trauma. So she can actually look at it and go, do you know what? I don't want to drink. Now I could never do that because I had too much in the backpack. There was too much shit, and it all came spilling out when I got drunk. And you know, and then I know that you're going to talk about shame, but it's the shame, isn't it? You know, like that shame just keeps piling on and piling on and piling on. And the only thing that I knew to avoid dealing with that shame and feeling those feelings was to drink and to use drugs.
Oh, the shame was debilitating. That's why I came up with So We're Not Ashamed. I mean, as I mentioned in the very beginning, like both my grandmother, like I grew up in a house where it's like being an alcoholic was like literally you have like, like, oh my God, they're alcoholics. Like it was always since I was a little girl. So it had this horrible preconceived notion. And so when I knew I was, it was the last thing I wanted to admit. And that's why getting sober was like the scariest thing. And I had no idea really what I was getting myself into. I had no clue that it was going to be this like amazing toolbox on how I could live my life. I had no idea. I thought they were going to maybe teach me to drink okay. Like I was going to be able to drink like a lady that I had never done. And it has given me, and the tools that are in that toolbox, like I want to hopefully like keep doing this forever. And I remember when I was first getting sober and my first friend relapsed, right? And went out and drank. And I was like, I looked at her like my parents had looked at alcoholics. I was like, get away from me. Oh my God, don't talk to me. Oh my God, oh my God, I can't do that. And the longer I've stayed sober, the more I appreciate the people and realize how strong the people are that do come back. Because so many people will come and get a day or two, like you mentioned, and then we won't ever see them again. And it's that ego and that everything that just brings like, I'm not going back there. I'm not going back there. They're horrible people. Whatever story you're going to tell yourself of not to come back. I watch people that come back and I'm like, oh my God, I think they're like the warriors. Like, I feel like you are like you've been to war again and you came back, because I don't know if I have another recovery in me.
I don't think I don't. I listen to people that have been out there and come back, and it just scares me. It scares the life out of me.
Yeah, I have no interest, but I'm grateful for the people that have, because I've learned from watching that, right?
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I just think no way would I don't want to go anywhere near it. And it's not just the alcohol, because I mean, I work in the substance misuse field and I have done for many years. And the amount of stories I've heard of people picking up a drink and then before you know it, they're on the heroin and the crack. And, you know, and I just think, well, I didn't know what I was doing in blackout back then. So God knows what I'd do in blackout now. And yeah, I couldn't imagine it. That's the reason why I work the program every day. And I've got a friend in recovery, and I love what she says. She says, I never have a day off. And never ever take a day off. You can't take a day off, because if you take a day off, that thinking comes back. And it only takes one stressful situation, or maybe
maybe a beautiful thing. Even you could be at a wedding and everybody around you is toasting and you're like, oh my gosh, that looks real. You know what? I'm just gonna have
yeah. You've got to be on guard. You know, like, I mean, it's kind of like I mean, the miracle of it, obviously the same thing has happened for you, is that the obsession and any desire for it has been completely removed. And I can buy alcohol for somebody and give it to them, and I can even smell it, and it doesn't bother me whatsoever. And even little things like, you know, alcohol in my mouthwash or anything like that, I don't worry about any of that stuff. And there's been times where, I mean, I ate some ice cream once, and it turned out that there was alcohol in this ice cream. And I said to my partner, it isn't a problem, because I'm not like intentionally putting that stuff in my body. I don't subscribe to, I mean, the only one thing about the Alcoholics Anonymous big book that I don't subscribe to is this idea of an allergy. I subscribe to the intolerance to alcohol 100%. Like, I know that when I ingest alcohol, I have intolerance to it and it affects me very, very badly. But there is an actual, like, if you have an allergy to alcohol and you drink alcohol, it'll kill you. And I don't feel as though I have an allergy, because I have ingested alcohol in my sobriety by accident, and it hasn't got, I've not been like, oh my God, you know, like I need a drink. So I think it's more about the intent, you know. And I mean, having said that, though, one thing I'll kind of qualify with that is people are different, aren't they? And it could be that somebody could have some mouthwash and it might kick off their craving. So I'm not saying that's for everybody. I'm just saying that's for me personally. But yeah, like I mean, ultimately, once you get to a stage in your recovery where, like, whether it's after a month or 2 years or 10 years or whatever, where your life's good, you know, and you've got peace of mind, and you feel like basically the majority of the time you're happy and joyful and the people around you are happy, why would you ever want to pick up a drink anyway? You know, why would you? Like, why would you want to ruin people's lives?
Well, I always say, for one, there's not enough in any restaurant I go to or any bar I go to. Let's just face it, because I've got like that wooden leg I talked about. Number two, it's so funny you're bringing this up, because last night I was out with all these ladies, and we were sitting there, and one of them didn't really know me. She was like, oh, well, what, do you want some of this wine or whatever she said? And everybody's like, oh no, Bizzy doesn't drink. And she's like, oh, well, should we drink? And I'm like, I go drink away. You know, I am so spiritually fit right now. Like, I don't care what you do. Don't throw up on me though. I'm not picking you up. I'm not cleaning you up. But I don't want any. I have this, like it says in the big book, I am spiritually fit. I can be in any situation in the world. And I feel that 110%. Like, thank God, I mean, that obsession was removed. Like we talked about, when I fell to my knees, and I've had bad shit happen. And, you know, and it hasn't always been fun being sober. It's been difficult. There's been trying times. Do I pick up a drink? No. Will I pick up a cigarette every once in a while? I do that. That is my bad vice. I will pick up a cigarette and I'll call somebody and I'll go off on my sponsor and I'm going to go on and on and on ad nauseum. But that drink, I play that tape. Like, I still remember walking into that bar and going, I'm going to have a dirty martini, and waking up the next day going, where's my car? Are those mirrors on it? Like, who is that person in my bed? You know what I mean? Like, all that stuff that I had when I was drinking, I'm like, I don't miss, like, I've been so happy that I know where my car is still to this day. I'm like, I wake up and my car's there. Is that so awesome? I remember, because like you, I don't remember. Like, there's so much I don't remember, and I don't want to. I don't regret that. You know, I don't regret it. It was part of my life. It's like my wrinkles that I've gotten. You know, I've earned these. I made those memories. I don't regret it, but I don't want to do it anymore. No. I got to a boxing ring. Alcohol was Muhammad Ali. Every time I went to drink it, it kicked my ass. I can't beat it. I just can't. I don't have the DNA for it. So next, what am I going to do? But now I get to see all these amazing things that are in the world that I totally missed. I mean, you're so lucky you have a little one, because you get to watch everything. You're not going to miss one thing. Like, everything, you get to just soak it all in like a sponge. It's amazing.
Well, they say the road gets narrower as well, don't they? And what I've noticed in my in her early life is, you know, the addiction to things like social media and like having your computer on or TV or whatever. Even those little things I'm able to be aware of, so that I'm making sure that I'm present for her as much as I possibly can be. Because obviously there's going to be times when the phone rings, or, you know, like you want to go on something or whatever on your computer or your phone, but I'm conscious of it. So I put that down, and I'm just, you know, I'm with her. And I keep thinking to myself how important that is, like how amazing that's going to be for her, that she's going to grow up with two parents and grandparents, two sets of grandparents that are all present for her. She's going to like really develop and grow and be able to, you know, just manage herself basically. Like, I think that's the key to it. You know, like when you're talking about the feelings, I could never manage my own feelings. And like my partner, she's a normie really, you know, and she's really, really good at talking, because I've got two step kids, 12 and 10, and you know, they're both going through, like, you know, transitions and stuff with school and hormones and all that kind of stuff. And the way that my partner speaks to them, you know, and like gets them to talk about the feelings and stuff. And I'm there as well, like I'm joining in these conversations, and I just think this is amazing. Like they are going to grow up to be really well-rounded humans, because that's what it's all about. It's about being able to label and pinpoint what's going on inside you, talk about it, get it out there, like you said, write about it, whatever the case may be, and just not have it rattling around in your head. Because if it's rattling around in your head, you need to medicate it. Something's got to give, hasn't it? So I feel very blessed, and I think with what you're doing with your life is obviously very similar to what I'm doing on this kind of podcast path and all that. Like, I never kind of say anything like grandiose, like I've been chosen or anything, but I think to myself, like, you have been given an opportunity to open your mouth and to share what happened to you, and to share, like, actually it was, my life wasn't that great as a result of drinking and using drugs. Like, it looked like it was good, but it wasn't. And now my life is so much better. And it's all because I'm trying to think about others first. I'm trying to give back, like in the best way that I can. The selfish person that I am is trying to, put all that stuff to one side and just try to be helpful to others. And, I hope that has an influence on other people, because then the world can actually get a better place. Like Kanye was saying, he's like, I believe in world peace. Like, I won't go that far, but I believe that people can definitely get on a lot better than they are doing. I think that the other thing as well is, I think that social media is so divisive, because actually when you get to sit down with people rather than being behind a screen, I get on with most people. There's only the odd person that I just can't, kind of gel with. Most people are okay. And I think that that's what we forget, like, with all I know in your country it's so divided, and it's a bit like that in our country as well. There's like teams and, and cliques and, like, and it's politics and all that kind of stuff. And actually, let's just get on, like, if we all just put our ego to one side, we can just get on.
I think that, at least for me, I believe that comes all from fear, right? You're different. So I'm scared of you because you're different. For me, I remember, like, I grew up Roman Catholic, right? So I went to church, and then I'd leave church and everybody would be talking about everybody else that they just left, right? They'd be like gossiping about this person, gossiping about that person. And when I went to a 12-step, this one meeting I would go to in Malvern, Pennsylvania, and it's called God as I Understand It. It's on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. And I remember going, and in the front row, sitting next to each other, was like a Jew, a Muslim, a Christian, and a WASP. I can't remember what the fourth person was, but like 4 people that you would not like normally put together, right? They're not supposed to be friendly. They were best friends. And it's like, we live in, and people might call us a cult or whatever the hell they want to call AA. I don't really give a shit. It's the best club I've ever joined, I have to say. And I think that first year of getting sober, that self-acceptance is so key. Like falling in love with yourself and knowing it's okay. That stuff you carried in your backpack for so long that brought you down. And it was like, at least for me, I felt like I was swimming in the ocean with all this shit. I couldn't go anywhere. But if you find somebody that's your fellow, whatever traveler that you want to call them, like your sponsor, whatever you want to call this person. But if you find the right person and you can fall in love with yourself and let go of even some of the most traumatic things you can let go of, if you feel loved from somebody else. And that's why I think it's so important to find somebody that you feel comfortable with, because once you love yourself, you can love everybody.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And it's like accepting the dark side as well, like actually, shining that kind of spotlight on the darkness and looking at it and saying, that's who I am, that's who I was. I accept that part of me. And then you can just be a person among people. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things that I value very, very highly, that, one day I just realized it was happening to me, was I walked into a room and I didn't think everybody was talking about me. I didn't think everybody was like looking at me, like, that
Right.
self-centered fear that you have, that you think, like everybody is concentrating on what I'm doing. No, I had the realization that everybody's thinking about what they're doing. Like everybody's too concerned about themselves to be worried about you. And I read something the other day actually, and it said like about the differences in people and racism and stuff like that. And it said it's not it, being a racist and being somebody who just doesn't understand different cultures are two completely different things.
Mm.
And you can take that comment out into the broader context. That fear that you're talking about, it's not necessarily racism or bigotry or anything like that. It's just not understanding other people and a misunderstanding of other people. And actually, one of the things about the cult of AA is that we all go to these rooms, whether it's online or in person, and you meet all these people that you never would normally have mixed with, and you listen, and you have to listen. You're not allowed to butt in. You have to listen to them talking, and it might be for half an hour, it might be for 5 minutes, whatever. But you listen and you think, like there's a Sikh guy that goes to one of the meetings that I go to. I've never known a Sikh in my life. I've had friends, I've had Muslim friends, I've had black friends, I've had other Asian friends, but I've never known a Sikh. And he's been talking about his life and he's been sharing, his story. And I really like this guy, and and I've spoken to him a couple of times now outside of the meeting, and I'm listening to his story, and I'm fascinated by his culture, by him as a person, and it's just lovely. Like it's nice to just get to know people, and that's what I get out of it, and you go to the meetings, and not only is there that aspect of it, but just by opening your mouth, you're helping another human being.
And people don't get that, because at least for me, when I first came in, it was like, oh, you have to go do service. And it's like, really? Where do I get to go? And I get to do all these things and people don't. And someone stopped me once, and I was like, I was newly sober, and I was in, and here we call meetings from Yale to jail. So, really brilliant people. And then, right, they call them Yale to jail. And I would go, I tend to like those meetings where there's a lot more, maybe like jail, or there's jail and Yale. And I shared, and I was like, and I raised my hand. I'm like, hi, I'm Elizabeth. I only have 4 months now. I only have 4 months. I kept going on about how little time I had. And this old timer, the big gruff guys comes up to me. He's like, I'd like to talk to you. And I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Oh my gosh. And he said, getting 1 day of sobriety is a really big deal. Really big deal. And I was like, wow. He's like, most people die of this disease.
Yeah.
And he's so right. And so when we can open up, we get that we're free now, right? We like ourselves. And then when people that look totally different, that we were grown up to say, like, kind of stay away from those people. You don't want to talk to those people, kids, stay over here, or whatever whatever was told to us, because they look different, right? They just have a different outfit on. And this is all our costumes, all the stuff we have on it's just our costumes. It's all about our soul, and like just loving the next guy and going, yeah, I know what it feels like to wake up in the morning and go, I don't know who that person is. I don't know what I did last night. I feel like shit, and I don't want to do this anymore. Like that is, busy living sober is all about getting busy living sober in the day. Yesterday's gone. Tomorrow's not here yet. All we have is today. And doing the splits is not comfortable, at least for me. I'm not a gymnast. So I don't, so like having one foot in yesterday and then the other foot in tomorrow is totally uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's so comfortable. So it's like learning to be like comfortable in your own skin is like the biggest thing. And it's hard. I think that's the hardest thing. I think, right? Because selfishly, we're not supposed to be selfish. And it's like such an oxymoron, right? Like,
well, this is what when I've been working with Dennis recently, that's what we've been working on a lot is like, I kind of reached a place in my life probably 2 or 3 months ago where, like, I was saying to Dennis, like, genuinely, like, I feel really successful in myself. Like, I've got a good job, I've got my family. Basically, there isn't anything that I really want. But then at the same time, I'm still driven to achieve things. And I said to him, what I want to do is to be able to do the things that I set my mind to. So, for example, like in early COVID, I put on about a stone of weight because, I'm like not doing any exercise, eating loads of crap. And I said, like, I just want to lose a stone. So it was like, right, okay, so, we'll work on that. And then it was like other things. But the way that we broke it down was just having very, very simply just a to-do list, just scheduling everything into your day, and just becoming more efficient and make it so from the moment I wake up in the morning to the moment I go to bed at night, I know what I'm doing throughout the day. And even if that is having quiet time to meditate or anything like that, I schedule it all in. And you know what? It's worked like an absolute dream. The reason why I'm saying it is because I'm busy living sober. I'm productive every single day, and whereas before I was just kind of like, yeah, I feel good, and I was just going about my day and doing kind of whatever. Like if something came up, then I'd do it, or I've got to do that, I'd do it. Whereas now I'm like, right, I need to do this. I've got a to-do list. I've got half an hour there. I'm going to do this, or I'm going to go for a run. And I've lost a stone in that time. I finished my book. There's loads of things that have happened. It's really productive. And again, what I get out of it is because my mind's not cluttered with all the things that I've got to do, I've got a peaceful mind, So there's all these tools that we can learn, aren't there? You've got a program for living, and then there's extra tools, whether it's through counseling or life coaching or whatever the case may be, that you can learn to just become more efficient and happier, basically. It's for me the barometer for me is peace of mind, actually, because I think that happiness arises out of a peaceful mind. Most people will say, I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. And I'll say, yeah, but you can't be happy unless you've got peace of mind first. If you don't have that, you might have a bit of joy here and there from certain things, but you won't actually be like genuinely happy all the time. So yeah, that's my thought on it.
It's really interesting because when you describe what you just like having that thing written on paper and saying you're going to do all these things every day, and I'm just going to, for me, I'm like, oh my God, I could never fucking do that. I do not like that. To me, it's like being scheduled like that, because I don't know where like my whole journey for this whole thing is, it's always like, I'm take spirituality now to a next level here, because I believe it's so interesting. I have people calling me like, well, wait a minute, how many guests do you have on your show, and what do you do? I don't obsess about this at all. Like having my podcast is like just something I do. It's fun. I've always wanted to be the next Barbara Walters, if you even know who that is. She used to be a big, like, that's what I wanted to be when I was a kid. I was on TV when I was drinking. I used to be on whatever. So I used to do all this stuff, and all I've ever wanted is a show. And it's weird that now God has put this, like, I'm able to do this. I don't know who watches my show. I have no idea who listens. I mean, there's people who write me every once in a while. I don't care. I don't care. It's another sobriety. And because, like, God has a plan. Like, if you hear anybody, do you know who Peter Flaherty is? He's that golfing guy. He's from it's from Ireland. Yeah. And most people that you hear how they get to where their success is, you're like, well, what happened? And they're like, well, something just came along and introduced it to them, right? Like somebody will walk up to you and say, hey, like it was this, like I had no idea. I went to this boardroom. It was like I was the last person that probably should have been there, but I went, and somebody said, can I help you? And I was like, yes. And it's just like, if you're willing. And so for me, like the idea of writing that list down, like, yeah, I'd like to lose 10 pounds. I'd like to lose whatever pounds, but it'll happen when it's supposed to happen, when I'm in the right state of mind. But sometimes like doing those things, writing this stuff down, and then if you don't do it, right, then that gives you another opportunity to beat yourself up. And you're like, shit, I didn't do that either. Fuck, I'm a loser. Because so many people come into these rooms like so filled with self-loathing. I hated myself. I couldn't even look in the mirror. I was like, oh my God, I'm such a loser. I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, sitting here, I am an alcoholic. So you give me an opportunity to screw up, as I said earlier, the 100 people, the one person, and I have a to-do list, and I'm like, I didn't do that. I didn't do that either. Oh my God, a sponsee called me, and she was about to go, do whatever. And I luckily have the ability that I can drop everything and be like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's write about it. What can we do? And that might take me an hour or two. You know what I mean? Just to be honest. And I always want to give somebody the opportunity that was given to me freely, which was like, yeah, I just need to dump for a minute. I'm like, okay, let's dump.
Yeah. Well, that's, I suppose that's the reason why you have to have, when you're doing any work like that, you have to have an accountability partner. So, like when you work in the steps, obviously you've got to have a sponsor. when we're in recovery, you should have a sponsor. You know, like if you haven't got a sponsor, then basically you're sponsoring yourself. And it's the same with this work. Like I'm exactly the same as you. The idea of writing everything down, like, is not like that's not what I do. Like I don't do it. I don't like to look at a to-do list is just like totally alien to me, and especially scheduling things in. So I had to be taught how to do it, and I started to do it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that like every part of my life is scheduled, because I'm not that good at it at all. I'm sure that these people that have taught me it do it that way, but
Well,
I'm
does
better.
Dennis have a sponsor?
Say
Because
again.
Dennis doesn't go to meetings or anything.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I
Yeah,
don't know.
he doesn't do any of that stuff.
I think he goes. I think he started to go back actually recently.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good, because when he called me, I was like, you meet people on their, it doesn't matter how, again, the years mean nothing. It's like, if I get off this, like this whole thing is the program. Like if I get off the program of just doing like a couple basic things, like you said earlier, like if I don't do those basic things and I start to think, well, I got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. You can't.
The reality is I got shit. I got nothing.
You can't get to a place where, well, in my opinion, you can't get to a place where you no longer need anybody else, and that you're the only person that's dishing out the advice or whatever. Like, I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, because,
right,
whatever their recovery is up to them, isn't it? Anybody that I've spoken to on this podcast has always got somebody that they talk to, whether it's a sponsor or another life coach or an advisor or whatever. And that's what's most important, I think, is somebody that you can just and it's about honesty, like you said. If I don't have at least one person that I can be honest with, then I'm in trouble, because I'm hiding stuff. That stuff's going to manifest itself into, and during my recovery, I've been very dishonest on a number of occasions. I mean, I've done all sorts of stuff, like things that what usually happens to me is I'll judge someone else for doing something, and I think I'd never do that, and then 6 months later I've done it. And that's my higher power's way of showing me that I'm just a fallible human being. And it's good, because I can laugh about it now and just think to myself, well, I actually genuinely wouldn't do that anymore, because I've done it now and I've seen, the effect that has on other people. I mean, we're not saints, are we, at the end of the day? Like, we've put the drink down, and if we don't work on ourselves, then we'll just carry on behaving the way that we used to behave.
Exactly. And I think that that's the one thing that I just every day, like if I've done the only thing I've done perfectly this entire time is I just haven't drank one day at a time. Like that is the one thing I've done perfectly. And because of that, it gives me I do this study book with a lot of my sponsees. It's called the Little Red Book, and it's it's just dumbed down, and it's really easy to take sponsees through it. And today I read in here, and it's so true to this day, like willingness. I have to be willing. I have to always be willing. And the minute that I say I know everything and I don't want to be teachable is the minute that I'm like really scared. I'm really scared then. I am really scared, because I don't know anything.
No, you're fucked if you think like that, aren't you?
Like I fucking know nothing. And I just I have to have somebody who's like, maybe they have less time. There's people that have got one day that come in and I'm like, holy shit, what did they just say? And it's just like, you're like, oh my God, I've never heard something so profound in my whole life. And then you hear somebody with 30 years and you're like, oh my God, they're like a dry drunk. Like, it's just like, we're all just trying to do the best we can do on this path along the way. But I find that the more I'm willing to be light, light, like let the light in.
Yeah.
The more pleasant my life is, right?
Yeah, definitely. What would you say that life in recovery means to you then?
Oh my God, it would bring, it's like air to me. I couldn't live life without it. I just couldn't. It's, and the people that have been there before me and the people that will be there after me forever and ever, and just to think we have a disease that wants us dead. This is not a joke by any stretch of the imagination. There was a woman I met, adorable looking, pretty girl. And I met her she was in a state hospital. And I went to bring a meeting to there. And she was on all sorts of drugs and everything. The hospital had her on everything. And then I met her out and she came to a meeting. And she didn't remember meeting me, because she was so drugged up. And she went to many institutions. And they found her dead a week ago, 4 kids, beautiful husband, beautiful girl. And these 4 little kids don't have mom.
It's terrible, isn't it?
It's this is like a scary thing we have. And right now there's a lot of people out there that are just freaking out. And they just feel so alone and they're so lost and they're so scared. And that's the weirdest thing about COVID is like, we don't know what it looks like, right? We have no idea. We can't touch it. It's just like alcoholism. We've been fighting, but for us, we're used to it, right? Because we're constantly fighting this battle that's out there. I mean, it's not like we're in battle, like we're going to war or anything, but we are conscious of it. We're aware of it. And so you just throw COVID on it and we get it, right? Okay, so now I'm just going to amp it up and put a mask on. But for people that have alcoholism and then you put that fear on top of it, it's just like that rabbit hole just gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah, it's like throwing flames on the fire, isn't it?
It is.
I think this is the importance of having a spiritual program, and it doesn't necessarily need to be the 12 steps, like for anybody that's out there that's listening, it's just the importance of like having people that you can speak to.
That's I don't stand behind one treatment over another treatment. I can't tell you what works. I mean, I can tell you what works for me, but I'm not going to judge you if you decide to go to church, if you go and you do smart recovery, if you decide I'm going to become a triathlete and I'm just going to go work out all the time, whatever it is that's going to save your life.
Yeah.
Do it.
I think that the truth of the matter, though, and I agree with what you just said, and I always say that on the podcast, there isn't, it's not a one size fits all, and I always say it's whatever works for you. But I think that the one thing that the 12 steps does that other things don't do or don't seem to do is to get to the very, very root of the problem. And even sometimes with the 12 steps, like I've gone outside of the 12 steps to deal with certain things, but only once I've identified what the problem is by working the steps, especially steps 4, 5, and then 6 and 7, looking at those defects of character, because ultimately, like we've already said, the problem is fear. Fear is the evil corroding thread, isn't it? And fear is the one thing that brings us all down. Like we're either living in fear or we're living in faith, one of the two. And if you're living in fear, then this is where all the problems start to arise. This is where anger comes from. It's where jealousy comes from. It's where suicide comes from. It like all stems from that fear. And I feel as though like this stuff should be taught in schools. I mean, I wrote my first book in 2016, and it was called Addiction Prevention. And that was the point of the book, was to say that, when I was a child, if I had been taught these principles when I was a kid, I don't think that I would have gone as far down the road as I did, because I would have had a means of being able to deal with that anxiety and that depression. I'm not saying that I necessarily wouldn't have picked up a drink, and I'm not saying that I wouldn't have become an alcoholic, but what I am saying is that I would have been far more able to deal with my emotional and mental problems. And I stand by that to this day. And I can't see any reason why kids wouldn't be taught this stuff that we learn in recovery as a way of just living. Like, I mean, like there's nothing negative about it. It's all positive. I mean, and for anybody that, that thinks, oh, it's just religious, but take religion out of it completely. Remove the word God completely, and just, even if it was just that your higher power was the group, the people, that's a power greater than yourself. Because I know loads of atheists in recovery, so it can't just be that, that you have to believe in this one God, like that's not the case. And I just can't see anything negative about it, like when people say, oh, it's a cult, or, why would you want to?
Weird.
Yeah. there isn't, there's no, there's the only negatives that ever come with anything to do with recovery are obviously every now and then you'll get a bad apple. You'll get somebody who's just genuinely not a nice person who might have a negative effect on people, and I've seen that happen. That's happened to me as well. But it's just all positive vibes, you know. So it really is about love, isn't it?
It is. And I think that the thing that people forget, like at least here in America, and I'm almost positive over there, they call them spirits, right? They're called spirits. Like
Yeah.
it's spirit. And, you know, the spirit companies probably really don't want us going out there talking about how people can find at a younger age. And so it's a spiritual thing for me, right? Like, because my whole thing, it was at my core. It was totally inside of me. I don't know if my parents and what they did, if I, you know, had done something. I don't know. I have no idea. It was what it was. I wish that I had known that my grandmothers were alcoholics and that there was a solution, that I didn't have to die like that. Like that is what I wish I knew, because I think that the shame is still out there as much as we've been talking about it more and more and more. And people are getting a little, you know, softer about it. There's communities in the society, in the society here, and I'm sure over there that people are like, you know, that's just, you guys are just crazy over there. What are you talking about? Like this AA thing. And there's so much shame. So with my kids, since they were little, I was like, just so you guys know, you know, mommy and daddy are both alcoholics. When you go out and you take a drink, I just want you to be aware that there is something inside of you that could take you to that next level. And I want you to know that if you have anything you need to talk to me about, I'm going to listen. Yeah. Does that mean I'm going to go and maybe pick you up and take you to a, probably not. I'm not going to probably pick you up unless I know you're really bad and take you to a rehab. But we're going to talk about it, and we're going to figure out what is it that you're searching for that you can't find outside of yourself, that you feel like you need to pick up that thing right away. I know it's so much in society, you know, and everybody says, well, it's American. No, it's British. No, it's Irish. Well, it's everywhere. Everybody loves to drink.
Of course they do. It's the human condition. The spiritual malady is the human condition, as far as I can tell. And people just have it worse than others. That's literally all it is. And you know, an interesting fact when I was researching that book, one of the things that I came across was that you're actually more influenced in your early childhood. You're more influenced by your friends and your outside influences outside of the family. It's about 20 to 30% influenced by your actual immediate family, and the rest of your influences are outside of that. So if you're hanging around with people that drink and smoke weed and do whatever, steal cars or whatever the case may be, you're going to do that. The chances are you're going to get into that, and that's got very little to do with your family, you know. So I think the way I look at it is, it doesn't make any difference what your upbringing was. I was listening to a guy the other night, and his upbringing was completely different to mine. Mine was a privileged upbringing, and his was a terrible upbringing, and we both ended up in exactly the same place. So it doesn't make any difference, really, does it? What matters is like what we do about it in recovery, but also I think for future generations is we need to start looking at what we can do for the kids in order to take away that shame. And I think the more we talk about this, like, you know, when I was growing up, I was considered like one of the cool kids, you know, I was in the cool gang, you know, I've always been in the popular gang. So at the age of 28, to leave all that behind and to get into recovery and to no longer be in those circles, and now 10 years down the line, people that I know from school and from college and from university and in recovery all around the world are listening to this podcast and seeing me talk like this. I've had people contact me and say, wow, like, I didn't know, like I would never have known, or it's cool that you can talk openly and honestly about this stuff. Like I did a podcast with my dad, and that's had more listens than any other podcast that I've done, and more comments. You know, people have been messaging me about it and asking, and you know, saying how cool it was, and it was just a great thing to do, you know. And who knows what effect?
I want to hear it.
Yeah, just go to the podcast. It's there. It's I think it was number 50.
How was that for you emotionally? And I know I'm not interviewing you, but
it was amazing because he actually apologized to me as well. Like and you know what the thing was, I dealt with my resentment towards my dad when I worked the steps, but I didn't realize that I still had a little bit of resentment, and it was kind of like it was just there lurking in the background. And the reason why I had a resentment was he'd never formally apologized to me. He'd never sat me down and said, you know what, I'm really sorry about da da da. And on the podcast, we got to this bit, and he was like, he said, I did apologize to you, didn't I? And I said, no, you didn't. And he went, well, I'd like to apologize to you now. And it was just, it was like this massive like relief. But you know what? It made me feel so horrible at the same time, because I thought he thought he'd already apologized. So all these years, he thought he'd actually apologized. But yeah, it was very cathartic. It was very cathartic. And it also helped me to see, listening to his story, it helped me to understand him better as a person, and also to see like where some of my traits come from, and and how he's kind of like, it's taken him a lot longer to take responsibility for the way that he's behaved, and he's never really gone down the spiritual side in recovery. I don't think he had that type of sponsorship. So when I got into recovery and I started meditating and doing all this stuff, he was a little bit like, oh, what's this? And I was like, it's the program.
You're like, he's like, this is boring. What are you doing?
Yeah, he's like, meditation. We don't meditate in Manchester. and I just said, no, I said, like, this is the program, like this is what's been suggested, and he's kind of got into that a little bit now. So yeah, it's helped.
That is such a huge blessing. How lucky are you? God, that's awesome. I'm envious.
These are the types of things that feel that are like very God-given, and
yeah,
like when I've written my books and stuff and I've talked about this stuff, it's like you just feel as though it's just a nice feeling to think that somebody, even if it's like we said at the beginning, if it's just one person that reads this and it has some sort of a positive effect, then that's just a really nice feeling, and it's the opposite to the way that I used to think. I just wanted to be famous. I was a DJ for years, and I just wanted to be famous, and I wanted to have all the money, have the, the attractive wife, and, and like the cars and the houses and all that kind of stuff. And I could never quite get there, and I could just never quite. And in recovery, I realized, well, I was a dick. I was a complete dick, and I was upsetting people, and, and I was just not a nice person, really. And I can admit that now, and on this format, like, I try to be as honest as I can be, just to show that a leopard can change its spots, and people can change. And even though that change is slow and gradual and progressive, and sometimes you can take one step forward and two steps back, which I have in many areas, I know that I'm getting better. I'm a better human being as time goes by. So it's just a beautiful forum. And one thing I would ask you as well as we come to close is, what do you say to people that are struggling, or anybody out there that might be thinking about making a change?
I always say, for one, know that you're not alone. You're not alone. This isn't as scary. Reach out to someone. I mean, you can reach out to both of us. We're both available. I have people who write to me. They're always like, "Oh my gosh, you wrote me right back," and I'm like, "Yes, I will write you right back. I promise you." And it's not as scary as you think. Life will still be fun. I still have a ton of fun. Whoever told you that you're not going to have fun is a liar. Falling in love with yourself is the biggest gift in the entire universe that I could ever imagine. It's like finally knowing that I'm okay. And we talked about earlier, knowing, like, God forbid if I were to die, right? If I'm going to be okay. Like, it's okay. It's okay. I am not scared. It's like whatever comes, and we were talking about spirituality and the God thing. And I know a lot of people are scared of that God thing. And I've helped a lot of people that don't believe in God. And, I was raised to believe, I was Catholic. So, Jesus Christ dies and Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb and the rock's been moved and the body's not there. Now, do I need to really, like, that was scary growing up like that, having Jesus Christ on a cross with, nails in his hands and thorns in his head. That's really scary as a little kid. And so that that's not my jive today. I have somebody very close to me who always says the sunrise is my God. Like, I know every morning the sun is going to rise. It's either going to rise behind a mask of clouds or it's not, but it is going to rise. And I have no stake in that day until that day comes, right? So each day, if I have that sunrise, I'm like, we're all okay today. Just today.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, it was like when I was listening to Kanye and he was talking, like every time he uses the word God, I kind of bristle a little bit. And I wasn't even raised like particularly religious, but it's kind of like there's so many connotations, isn't there? You know, it's almost like I'm feeling the 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 bristliness for other people rather than myself. So I'm always like really conscious of like when I'm using, like I'll use the word God in the right context. Like if I was talking to you, I'd have no problem saying that word. But if I was using it, you know, if I was talking to a newcomer or, you know, if I'm talking to somebody that I don't know, I would always refer to it as a higher power because, you know, like everybody conjures up an image, don't they, in the mind when you say the word God.
And it's, yeah, and it's kind of, I don't, and as Kanye kind of mentioned it, we all need God, right? We all need something. And if it doesn't have to be Jesus Christ, the one on the cross, whatever it is, like, and so many people get so, oh my gosh, don't say it. Like you just, bristles, my hair stands on the back of my neck. For me, I've always, just because I left that Catholic church and I went to an Episcopal church, which is, you know, hello from Henry VIII. And it's they call it Catholic light, and you know, there you can be whatever the hell you want to be. You know, you can, and we're gonna love you anywhere. And that's where I first learned that, like, it's like the God thing's okay. It's okay, and I don't want anybody to be scared of that. And I know there's scary things and things happen and we can't explain them and bad things happen, but we're humans. And God gave us an opportunity to make a choice, right? So we get to make a choice. I mean, it started in the very beginning with Adam and Eve. Like, are you going to eat the apple or you're not going to eat? You're not supposed to eat that apple. But if you eat that apple, and that's like where it all begins. We're all human. We're all trying our best each and every day. And I think if we look at other humans, like, you know, that person did not wake up this morning wanting to be an asshole. I would bet $1 million their intention that day was not to be like that. Everyone's intention, I think, is good. I think most people, and you've said it here, most people are good.
Yeah.
That ego and that fear of what is something different, oh my gosh, it's scary. But if you're open to it and you if you walk towards it rather than away from it, it's like, wow, I learned so much from doing that. God.
It's having an open mind, isn't it? And
Yeah.
like I absolutely do not subscribe to the idea that any child is born evil. Every
No.
single child is born pure and good, and that ego develops as a result of their life experiences. You know, like even somebody as evil as Adolf Hitler, like he was a child, he was a baby, somebody's baby.
Yeah.
And I actually, funnily enough, I actually wrote this bit about him in one of my books because when you look at his life, he had the typical life of an addict basically. He was homeless when he was young. He lost his brother. He lived through loads of trauma. He ended up homeless when he was older, conscripted into the army, addicted to all manner of drugs, speed, cocaine, probably alcohol as well. So, you know, like when you're looking at this person who's like the personification of evil in the world today, anybody thinks of evil, they think of him. He's probably just one of us, or was one of us, you know, that was just completely and utterly messed up and turned into a terrible human being. And there's so many people out there like that, you know, that really it's nobody's fault, is it? Like it's nobody's fault what your circumstances are. You could be born anywhere in the world. I think that you're right. I think we do have a choice, but I didn't feel like I had a choice until I got recovery.
I had no choice. I had no choice. And people talk about freedom. I mean, we could probably talk till tomorrow. I'm just telling you, so I'm
Yeah.
at any time. But you know, I didn't realize that I was living in my own little private hell, right? Like, okay, when am I going to get it? Do I have enough of it? How am I going to do it right? Okay, meaning before I did anything, it's like I don't want to get hungover, but I have to have enough of my stuff. How am I going to have enough of my stuff? Do I have enough bottles of wine? Because I need to have a bottle of wine when I get ready. I need to have a bottle of wine when I come back at the end of the night. Or you're at a party and you've like, I got to be closer to the bar. Like, I'm not really talking to the person who's in front of me. I'm looking at the waiter or the waitress who's got the drinks, and I got to get more of them. Where are those? I need more. I need more. I need more. That's all I thought about. Oh my God, I'm hungover. Oh my God, I'm so hungover. Why did I do that? Why did I do that again? Oh my God, how did I do this again? The insanity. Like, talk about egomaniac with inferiority complex. I mean, that was me, right? I mean, that's what we were, you know?
Yeah.
I got it all. I'm all this. I'm all that. I'm all this. And a bag of shit. That's it. That's really it. I mean, I was like nothing. I had the most simple, boring life. You'd sit on a bar stool and say, you know what I'm going to do? I can't wait till I have my own show. Day, you're still the next day there you are sitting at the same bar stool talking to the same three cronies, and you're like, okay, great, we're all sitting here again, and I'm not doing anything, not growing at all.
Yeah.
I don't want to ever live in that prison again.
Now it is. It's a prison of your own making, isn't it?
Totally, completely.
Well, thank God we've got recovery. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
It's been wonderful. I can't wait. We'll be in touch and we'll pick a date.
Cool. Just let me know, and yeah, I'd love to. Where do we find you on? Say again.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
No, you go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Say, enjoy that baby. Enjoy every second, because before you know it, she's gonna be like, mine are all out now, and I'm like, where are they? What are they doing? Oh my God! Like, when they're in the crib, you're like, oh my God, are they going to grow up? And then just enjoy I'm just going to tell you, enjoy every second, because before you know it, she's going to be going, bye, Dad. And you're going to be like,
I definitely will. Where do we find you online?
Okay, so you can find me at busylivingsober.com, BUSY living, LIVING, sober.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on everything that you could probably imagine. I'm not on, there was one that I'm not on. I don't know. I'm on the internet. You can find me, Elizabeth Chance. You can even Google me.
Brilliant.
And Bizzy Chance, and go to Busy Living Sober. And if you are battling this disease and you feel like you just can't go on and you're sick and tired, please reach out. I promise I'll write you back. I promise. We will love you till you love yourselves. Isn't that what we heard? And it was surely the truth.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Bizzy. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers, honey. It's been so great knowing you. I'll talk to you later. I'll reach out. Okay.
Thanks very much for listening, and if you've been affected by any of the subjects discussed in the podcast, check out the links underneath the podcast description for a range of mutual aid organisations, and also don't forget to check out www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk for all my books and social media links. And if you'd like to support the podcast financially, visit www.patreon.com/lifeinrecovery. And also, just a last word about my sponsors, Dennis Berry Life Coaching. So visit www.dennisberry.com for a free consultation, and don't forget to use the code words Life in Recovery for 10% off your next 3 sessions. And also, if you visit sugaraddiction.com/Life in Recovery, you can download a free copy of Mike's book all about sugar addiction, and if you're really serious, check out his 30-day sugar freedom challenge whilst you're there. Peace and love, and goodbye for now.